you okay?
More or less. Are you okay?
I've been worse. Glad you're finally back.
Glad to be back.
How much do you remember?
Everything. Including some very poor words I said to you. I'm sorry.
It's okay, man. You weren't yourself.
Wasn't I, though?
It doesn't matter now, Jude. We have a job to do. Right about that.
Kid, you okay?
Bit of a headache? Vice?
Champion.
Alright, where are we at?
It doesn't have a host anymore. Shouldn't that mean it's more vulnerable?
Indeed, the entity requires a host to work through, a way for its data form to interact with the universe.
Unfortunately, it accounted for that. It built Comicron 2's holographic bridge so it could just possess a hologram. It's not as perfect as a living being, but it's still a method of interaction.
Why is the other ship just sitting there?
Funny you bring that up.
It is vulnerable to attack. We should strike now. Disable the ship's power systems to cut off the hologram so we might attack it directly.
There are independent power systems to prevent that from happening. It planned ahead.
Then any tactical insight you can provide would be appreciated.
Well, you see, that's the funny part. I'm aware now of a lot of its thoughts. There's something that's been confusing me.
What's that?
Why hasn't it taken over Earth?
Indeed, I had not considered that.
How do you figure, kid? The entity's goal when we last fought it was to absorb all life and all reality into it, to make everything a part of it. But it's been awake since the King of Worms. That was a few years ago. It took Vice that same amount of time to get himself back up to where he is now, but it took the entity less than a year to absorb everything except me into it. So, why hasn't it done that now?
Perhaps it knew I was waiting for it.
No offense, Vice. Actually, all the offense, but you weren't exactly in a position to do anything about it. But nobody has been taken. It's just been sitting there like that this entire time. There's something more going on here. Speculation about its motives aside, attacking it again will do us no good. Lord Vice, you pursued that thing halfway across the multiverse. Attacking it once more will just resume the chase. We need a permanent solution to the entity.
Agreed. I am weary of this constant hunt. Let us put an end to this abomination.
Good. Smart people, figure out a miracle. In the meantime, I need to find a way to recenter myself, to refocus myself. And the best way to do that is by reviewing a comic.
Welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Linkara's gonna teach you all a lesson you won't learn. Brodsky, you're not the smartest. Life out, you're not an artist. Anyone who's had a bad comic published, it could be your turn. Linkara, he's a man punch, wears a party hat. Linkara, he has a magic gun. Where'd he purchase that? Linkara, coins, robots, Amazons and trucks. Linkara, this comic sucks. Linkara.
Oh, geez, it's weird teleporting into sitting down. Hello and welcome to Atop the Fourth Wall, where bad comics burn. Patreon-sponsored review time again, and once again, not a comic, though not for lack of trying on the patrons' part. The patron had initially asked me to cover The Complete Thunderbird Story, a prequel comic to the series that was released in Thunderbirds the Comic. The problem is that this was released in British comic strip format, which, if you'll recall that Doctor Who Christmas comic I did a few years ago, meant only about 2 to 3 pages at a time, released over a lot of comics. Sadly, at the time of the request, it wasn't available in a collected format, and the copies of some of the issues I found, I couldn't find them all on eBay, were a bit expensive, so tracking this all down would have been too pricey an undertaking. It's a bit of a shame I couldn't do it because the art style is a bit interesting given the format of the show. Fortunately, they had an alternative in mind. The 1966 film Thunderbirds Are Go! I should probably explain what the hell Thunderbirds is for those who don't know. Although it's entirely likely you guys do. I was shocked by the amount of people who knew what the hell I was talking about a while back when I made a joke referencing the show UFO. Seriously, guys, I'm the one who's supposed to be referencing obscure sci-fi shows. How are you all beating me to the punch? To talk about Thunderbirds, we need to talk about Super Marionation, marionette puppets with electronic components in them for slightly more complex movements, most notably a voice synchronization device that allowed somewhat more realistic lip movements from the puppets that matched with pre-recorded dialogue. The most modern use of it I can think of would be Team America World Police, or that segment in the 200th episode of Stargate SG-1. Right! Jerry Anderson pioneered the technique and helped develop several TV shows utilizing it, including Fireball, XL5, Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons, but most notably, Thunderbirds, which he developed with then-wife Sylvia Anderson. Thunderbirds is the story of International Rescue, a technologically advanced organization that utilized 5 super vehicles that go around the world, well, rescuing people, appropriately named Thunderbirds 1 through 5. The main characters are primarily the leader of International Rescue, Jeff Tracy, Field Agent Lady Penelope, and Jeff's 5 sons, who pilot the Thunderbirds, because nepotism is a huge problem in the puppet community. The other thing notable about it is the use of miniatures and models for the ships. AP Films, later Century 21 Productions, would build awesome practical effects for this stuff, attempting to break into more non-puppet work with the aforementioned UFO, but to slightly better success with Space 1999. The series has actually gotten a reboot recently, with a pretty combination of CGI and model work, surprising that they'd actually mix the two and not just go straight CG. There was also the 2004 live-action movie directed by Jonathan Frakes of Star Trek fame, but I've never seen it, and I know a lot of fans of the original are not kind to it. Thunderbirds Are Go is the first of 2 movies that's basically an extension of the TV show. This was back in the day when long-running storylines on TV shows were a rare novelty, assuming it happened at all, so there's not really all that much you need to know about the series walking into the film. So let's dig into Thunderbirds Are Go and see if the film stalls on launch. We open, naturally, with production logos. Oh, hang on a second, guys. Ha! Bullseye!
Thunderbirds Are Go!
Look, stop boasting about how you got a Zapdos in the game. I'm still trying to get a legendary here. Man, the Earth needs an exfoliating cream. After a little introduction to our heroes and what vehicles they drive, we cut over to a space center, where the Zero-X spacecraft is prepping for launch. You always gotta love when there's a ship so big, it's easier to move the building surrounding it than the ship itself. Zero-X is a ship intended for Mars, and naturally it's modular, with various sections combining together into a larger aircraft, although frankly they missed out on a golden opportunity to have this thing become a giant robot, Voltron style. Also, I'm guessing this thing was so expensive they had to cut back personnel. They've got one guy in the control tower doing everything.
This is assembly control, closing now.
Well, time for my lunch break. Everybody take 5. Actually, he's heading down to meet the crew of the Zero-X.
Now this is a tough assignment. And if this mission is successful, you will be the first men to land on Mars.
I know we probably should have told you that sooner than right before the launch, but whew, it has been a crazy weekend. The flight crew is loaded onto the Zero X, and I just have to smile. The thing is that they could never get the puppets to walk convincingly, so they tried to minimize that kind of movement as much as possible. Hence, as part of this super expensive project, the crew is loaded on there already strapped into their chairs on a big track. By the by, after the bridge module is loaded onto the ship, we hit the 10-minute mark. And that is all that has happened. Opening credits, ship is assembled. Just FYI, this is kind of important, guys, faux serious. For all the crap Star Trek the Motion Picture gets for focusing too much on its special effects while nothing happens, it's got nothing on Thunderbirds. Don't get me wrong, as a fan of this kind of stuff, I friggin' love it, and I'm happy to watch, but for others, this might be a bit slow. Hell, aside from the cast photos and names, we haven't actually seen the main characters yet. That's not until the 19.5-minute mark. Anyway, Zero X takes off, but we soon see someone skulking around the engine room taking photographs of the assembly. However, that person gets their boot stuck in one of the hydraulics, and a false mask falls off.
His face.
It's revealed to be Thunderbird's antagonist, the Hood, a spy and terrorist always attempting to learn the technical secrets of the Thunderbird's crafts. He's able to wrest his foot from the hydraulics, but the delay caused by his jamming makes the ship unable to ascend. At mission control, we see that the one guy actually has his desk rotate around. Seems like installing that would be more expensive than just having a second guy there, but what do I know? As Zero X continues to fall... Oh my god! Someone cut his strings! The crew manages to eject as Zero X crashes into the water and explodes. Geez, maybe we shouldn't have made our spaceship out of oily rags and matchsticks. We cut to 2 years later at the International Council of Malformed Puzzle Pieces to see the end of the investigation into the crash. They've determined that it is indeed sabotage.
Now, before we progress further with this meeting, I would ask you for a vote of confidence in the findings of this very fine report.
This is a weird remake of 12 Angry Men. You know, other movies would cut out the drama of voting in the confidence of a report about sabotage, but this movie's a rebel. Mars and Earth are in the proper position for a second launch, and they vote again to proceed with their second attempt, but one guy votes against it, saying that the security arrangements are insufficient and that they should bring in international rescue to assist. And with that, there is much watermelons and rhubarb. We finally cut to Tracy Island, headquarters of International Rescue, where the team discusses their plan, with one of their craft basically helping them each step along the way, Thunderbird 3 in particular being a spacecraft that can orbit the Earth. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with letting private citizens own space-based weapons over the Earth. What's the worst that could happen? Why do I suddenly feel like a hypocrite? As Scott Tracy is loaded into Thunderbird 1, and I do mean loaded, I thought installing the automatic chairs in the Zero X was bad, but they just laid the puppet on a slip and slide to get him into this thing. You've also got to love any job that lets you go to work in your casual evening wear. Man, the pool cleaner is in for a hell of a surprise today.
Thunderbird 1, ready to go.
Sorry, I had to change in here. I kind of live out of Thunderbird 1. By the by, who designed the International Rescue uniforms? Because when I think rescue workers, I think giant sash intended for medals and an ice cream man hat. Hell, why do they even need uniforms? From what I understand, International Rescue is supposed to be kind of a secret organization in order to protect its tech from those who would steal it. Who cares if you work in a uniform or a bathrobe and slippers? Then again, I work from home and people still question my lack of footwear in my own office, so there you go. Also that I don't know the difference between football and rugby. Anyway, Jeff Tracy, patriarch of the family and the de facto leader of International Rescue, talks with secretary and scientist Tintin Cairano, who wonders if the saboteurs will make an attempt at the second Zero X vehicle.
If they do strike again, I know just the person to take care of them.
I creepily have a giant picture of her hanging on my wall. Sometimes I just sit and stare at it for hours at a time. He's referring to Lady Penelope, who's hanging out at her estate and occasionally transforming herself into a real girl so she can pour some tea. Said tea starts beeping at her.
International Rescue, England.
Madam, this is your teapot speaking. Either put some real Earl Grey in me or I quit. Lady Penelope is dispatched to the launch site undercover as a reporter to keep an eye out for spies.
I'll call the airport. We're taking off for America with Fab 1 immediately.
That was a great scene.
During the press conference, Lady Penelope gives one of the astronauts a St. Christopher medallion she'd like him to wear. He agrees and puts it on. We forgot to put one on the puppet. Sorry for that. In universe, I don't get that. She tells the guy she wants him to wear it as a favor to the readers of her paper, but it's hard to prove that he did so if you have him hide it. You'd think he'd realize how weird that is. The next day, during liftoff, we see the purpose of the medallion was actually some kind of homing device. When they do a check-through of them, they realize one of the scientists on the Zero-X isn't responding. Going in to see, Scott Tracy discovers the hood, armed with a gun.
I should allow yourself 10 seconds before coming through this door after me. Otherwise, you might get your head blown off.
So, like, 10 seconds starting now, or 10 seconds after you leave? I need to time myself here. What was the hood's plan exactly? We saw on the first flight that the crew all joined together during the flight, and I've got to imagine the G-forces while they're being launched into space would prevent him from just getting up and walking out. The hood leaves in a car, or as Penelope's butler Parker calls it, a motor car. And Penelope gives chase, even after the hood gets into a boat. Her special vehicle, Fab 1, is a modified Rolls-Royce that can also transform into a boat. Meaning Lady Penelope has the same tech that Batman has from Batman Odyssey. Except hers is even more awesome because it's bright pink. Still, it can't fly, so when he then transfers into a helicopter, they just have to evade until they can finally shoot the hood down.
I don't think there's much point in looking for survivors, Parker.
No, milady.
I'm so disappointed I won't get to run him down with this thing.
Look, milady. Look!
What a magnificent sight.
There's the hood! And he's screaming in agony as he both drowns and burns to death at the same time. Good show. Zero-X launches without further incident and reaches orbit. With everything seeming to be okay, Thunderbird 3 is recalled, and the international rescue crew agrees to meet up with Lady Penelope at the Swinging Star nightclub in Celebration. Jeff Tracy is a little pissed at first that they're going out, but ultimately lets them.
Sure, I understand you need a break, but this is a tough job we're doing here.
I mean, look at how hard I have it. I almost had to stand up earlier. So I made a mistake when I originally wrote this and said that Alan was the pilot of Thunderbird 4, the submarine vehicle, and had to stay behind at the base since, well, submarines weren't necessary for this job. Easy mistake to make when there are 5 of these guys and they're all pretty similar. But no, he's the pilot of Thunderbird 3, the spaceship, and therefore came along on the mission. Yet he's already back at base and wasn't informed about them going out to the nightclub with the others. So when the hell did the actual Thunderbird 4 pilot leave to go join them, and why didn't they tell Alan they were doing this? Anyway, he's sad that he's going to miss the nightclub, so invites Tintin out to the mainland for some fun. However, Jeff puts a stop to that since someone needs to stick around and man the base in case a rescue is necessary.
Oh, that's all right, Mr. Tracy, I understand.
Well, I don't. I'm going to bed.
Spoken like a 9-year-old.
But won't you have some coffee, Alan?
No, thanks. It keeps me awake.
Well, yeah, that's what coffee does. What? Gotta love how dedicated to this job your kids are, Jeff. Maybe this is why you should hire more than like 5 people. That day for night, Alan dreams. Just a side note, but how do you even end up with day for night when you're working with models in a studio? So what is Alan dreaming about? Standing around on a smoky stage with some kind of weird fungus while wearing that.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
He dreams of Penelope taking him out to the Swinging Star nightclub.
Now, milady?
Now, Parker.
Oh hey, I guess her car can fly. Roads, Alan? Where we're going, we don't need roads. Well, look out, you guys! The Nostalgia Critic's about to fly into a plot hole! Anyway, they fly towards the dream version of the Swinging Star.
Christmas ornaments of the gods.
Gee, it's fabulous.
And clearly, you would know fabulous, Alan. Oh, geez, Parker. I think you're running an oil-rich mixture there. So now, Alan and Penelope are apparently stuck in that photograph from The Shining. As such, enjoy Cliff Richard and the Shadows, an actual singer and band who are in this for some reason. I don't know, maybe this whole thing was just a vehicle for them.
Wow, what a terrific group.
Wow, what a terrible line read.
Yes, they always play at the Swinging Star. You see, they're way out.
Yes, it's really way out to just strum your guitar for a bit. I think they kind of have an unfair advantage as guitar players since their hands literally work as guitar picks. Wow, this dream sequence is so boring, even the people in the dream are falling asleep. Wait, does this mean that Alan just dreamed of a cutaway to Parker sleeping in the car? His subconscious is weird.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we present the biggest star in the universe. None other than Cliff Richard Jr.
Followed by greatest comedian in the universe, Joe Piscopo.
Sometimes I feel you are cheating me.
You know, when you think about it, we are literally watching a puppet show right now.
A shooting star will shoot you, and Mars will go to war.
Say, anyone remember when this movie had a plot? With Dean Stockwell on guitar.
If you don't stop making me lose faith.
Man, the first cut of 2001: A Space Odyssey was messed up. So it turns out the moon is not made of cheese, but it is made of banana. Man, I don't know how much drugs they put in the drinks at this club, but more of that. In the dream, Alan is summoned by his father to come help in an emergency. Even in his dreams, he can't catch a break. And then he drops off the club as he tries to get into the car, waking up from the nightmare ending. Jeez, you could write a paper on this guy's psychosis. Thank you for joining us for this, A Pointless Scene. A pointless scene. We cut to 6 weeks later, where Zero X lands on Mars. Off screen. Whatever, it's only an historic moment in human history. Let's watch some guy singing in space on a guitar. Well, we do cut to the surface of Mars, which looks a lot grayer than I expected, but hey, I'm sure a fresh coat of paint on the models will fix that up. The team in the Mars rover notices a lot of strange coiling rock formations and decide to take a sample of one back to Earth.
As soon as you fire, I recommend you stand by at the ready.
Stand by at the ready? What for?
I don't really know. I've just got a feeling.
Just something in the back of my mind is screaming, moon spiders! Watch out for moon spiders! Actually, it turns out to be rock snakes. The piles uncoil, and apparently evolution on Mars granted these beings the ability to shoot cannons from their mouths. They call to be lifted back to the main ship and try to fight off the snakes as best as they can. They're outnumbered greatly and just barely manage to get back to the ship in one piece. We cut ahead again to Zero X's return to Earth. For the record, that means we spent less than 10 minutes on Mars. But hey, maybe what the audience really wanted to see was more scenes of Alan being pissy that he had to do his job. Part of Zero X's return involves them reattaching with the modules that got them past the atmosphere, but there's an accident, with one of the modules losing control, colliding with them, and exploding. The collision damaged not only their locking system, so they can't dock with a spare flight module, but also their escape pod system, so they can't just bail out, thus necessitating the main characters to actually be involved in the plot again. The Thunderbirds are launched to help rescue them, Alan in particular being sent aboard the Zero X to try to repair the escape pod.
Zero X, this is Central Control. Change to Channel 4.
Changing to Channel 4.
Negative Control, there's nothing good on Channel 4 right now. Resuming channel surfing. After a lengthy sequence where Thunderbird 2 has to catch up to them and then put Alan on board, which admittedly is both clever and pretty tense given how dangerous it is, he begins rewiring stuff. Honestly, the most unbelievable part of this whole thing is that Zero X is going to crash into a town of 4,800 people, and in the half hour they've got to repair this thing, they're able to evacuate the entire town to safety. At the last second, Alan effects the repairs, everyone gets out safely, and we get our money shot of Zero X crashing into the town, blowing up some model buildings, but good. They let Alan down on the ground, conveniently near Lady Penelope, who had come to the site after hearing about where it would hit. And then it turns out she's gonna take him to the same nightclub as the others.
It's like a dream come true.
At that moment, Cliff Richard comes out and shoves a moon-shaped banana into Alan's mouth. Alan is wearing a fake mustache, because apparently even their identities have to be secret as part of international rescue. I'm beginning to think that this whole thing is just an elaborate drug smuggling operation. But what's more, everyone else in the group is actually there, also wearing ridiculous facial hair, and congratulates Alan on his success. And yet, at the next table over, I bet the Hood is there, not wearing any disguise.
And there was I, thinking we were all alone.
Remember, Alan, One of the most comforting feelings a man can have in this world of ours is never to be alone.
Just remember that, as your family never allows you a moment of intimacy or privacy with other people. I had to accept that with Parker. He never leaves, Alan. He never leaves!
To Alan, the hero of the day.
Said with all the enthusiasm of buying more toner for your printer. And so our movie ends with the band of Her Majesty's Royal Marines performing the Thunderbirds theme. What, they don't get to have puppets, but Cliff Richard and the Shadows do? This movie is not very good. But if you're like me, that doesn't really matter because you're enjoying the puppets and the model work. But don't go looking for that engaging a film out of it. It's basically a bigger budget version of the TV show, and kudos to that, but large chunks of the movie exist purely to show off the models. Like I said, I'm totally into that, but it's not particularly compelling from a story perspective. Speaking of that story, it's not a very interesting one. Ship eventually gets to take off, Thunderbird member is a bit pouty, acid trip, difficulty returning to Earth, the end. The action scenes are exciting, but there's little to no characterization. Most of them are flat and lifeless. Alan gets the most to work with, and he comes across as just kind of a pouty teenage dork despite being in his 20s. Because he has to actually do his job and can't just go out on the town tomorrow night. The dream sequence is completely superfluous other than suggesting Alan has the hots for Lady Penelope, which, whoop-de-crap, it doesn't do anything meaningful, and the song isn't that great. The dialogue is either boring technical jargon, or just pretty dull in general. The most exciting bit is on Mars with the rock snakes, since it builds up some pretty creepy atmosphere before the attack of the monsters, but that's it. Overall, it's enjoyable to see if you're like me and love model work and practical effects, but don't go into this expecting anything of substance. Next time, we take a look at the comic adaptation of the first Tim Burton Batman movie, and yet it's this week where one could say, where does he get those wonderful toys?
Stop making me lose faith. I will have you put up there in space.
Any ideas?
Indeed, I have come up with a solution.
While you were possessed by the entity, you took control of several orbiting satellites, intent on using them as space-based weapons. Yeah, I remember. Some of the weapons you were creating were pretty sophisticated, all in a bid to destroy Vice's data form. Were you thinking of using the satellites against the entity? I think you were, actually.
It's possible, just as you were subconsciously playing chess against it, the satellites were, in fact, a solution to the entity. I admit, it is a brilliant idea.
From the future, 90s Kid brought back with him a primitive program that was intended to shield your consciousness from the entity. If that program was expanded, it could be used to trap the entity.
Combined with the dimensional portal technology from my ship, we could create a small pocket dimension made from this program that could contain the entity. Natural entropy for a dimension this small would make it decay within seconds of the portal closing. And with the entity unable to escape, it would die along with it.
And we would need the satellites both for projecting the program and for closing the portal. But how do we get the entity to go inside of it? That's the tricky part. Even with Comicron 1's full capabilities restored, Comicron 2's weapons are a match for it.
The entity's presence aboard the ship will enhance its weapons further. I doubt even the temporal shields could withstand its power.
We need someone to go over there and steer the ship into the portal. And I have this uneasy feeling that somebody has to be me.
I would prefer it be me, but the ship must cross close enough to the portal so that the entity would naturally be drawn inside by it. You can escape from that distance with a teleport beam, but my data form would not.
Okay. Then let's finally put an end to this thing.